Fathers are often unappreciated in modern society. Many feel that fathers are obsolete and are contented to let the government pick up the slack. With the rise of no-fault divorces and unenforced custody agreements, fatherless homes are becoming more commonplace. The worst part is, nobody seems to care. Join the Honey Badgers as we discuss the disappearance of fatherhood. As always, the show will be available for download after the broadcast at honeybadgerbrigade.com.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular, this is Honey Badger Radio, radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Tonight's topic is the disappearance of fatherhood. Tonight we have Crystal Garcia. Hey Crystal, how you doing? You there? I think Crystal's gone. We have Hannah Wallen.
Hello.
Hannah? All right, and we have a special...
We're not still doing our introducing ourselves, are we?
Just say one thing you're doing recently, and then we just a round thing, and then we can go to normal.
Every Wednesday on honeybadgerbrigade.com, I'm the admin for the Return of Femininity. What?
Yeah. Crystal, you're cutting in.
I'm writing 100 days of how to treat men right and of rating men. What?
I gotta turn off my air conditioner.
What? What did you say?
You were cutting in and out.
Are you talking to me? I can't hear.
You can't hear me?
All right, just go on to the next one.
Okay. We have Girl Writes What? Hey Karen. You there?
Hi. Yes, I'm here. What I've been doing lately is, if I had hair long enough that I could rip it out, I would. I've been arguing with progressives and feminists online about, the assumption of, the assumption of sociopathy in men that seems to inform every single branch of feminist thought. And, so here I am. I'm here, and I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about fathers.
Your body is ready.
My brain is melting, but...
Yeah. And we also have a special guest here to talk a little bit about, a bit of an update on Gamergate. Hey, Buttermancer.
Hello.
Is that what we're calling you? I forget what we were calling you.
No, you can call me my name, Rory Hutchings.
Okay.
It's all good.
So
I got nothing to hide.
So what's going on lately, huh? I mean, I know I've been lurking about, listening to the various things that have been going on with this. You want to talk a bit about that?
God. This week,
I'll help you out.
Everything went on its head, to say the least. So at the start of the week, Anita Sarkeesian actually had was actually attending the Hugs and Kisses Festival. And she basically went up to do a speech, and pretty much, I'm not going to get really too in-depth with it. One of the main things she said was... the one way to help women who are harassed online is actually believe women when they talk about their experiences. And basically just gone over and related her entire feminist movement to, of course, Gamergate and everything that's going on. Now, this is kind of a chain reaction of events. 4chan, one of the places that people have been posting a lot about Gamergate to begin with, has all of a sudden decided to stop allowing people to post about the entire event. They've been banning people off of V. They've been banning people off of Poll. They've been even banning people off the damn random board, which pretty much, goes... You could post about anything. I mean, I've been on there,
we're not supposed to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, 4chan itself, you can go on there and find, random pictures of, happy daily life events all the way down to children porn comics and, gore. So it doesn't make sense that something with video games is actually, being banned. I mean, that actually has pissed a lot of people off online. But lo and behold, Moot attended the conference, Moot being the person who actually runs 4chan.
He was a speaker. There. You know that, right?
Yeah, I do know.
He was trying to pimp his new side project or whatever.
Well, what's striking people is that a long time ago, Moot was parading around saying, 4chan was put out so people can talk about anything they want. And now all of a sudden the tables have turned a bit. He blames it to all these posts being removed just because of what happened with Chanology, the big protest that happened with, anonymous and Scientologists. And I think he's fearing some legal stuff that can happen with Gamergate. But it also wouldn't surprise me if Anita or a few other people threw their own 2 pieces in on him. I mean, that's just me. I think that there's something a little more going on, much rather than the legal implications of everything, because he never had a problem with it before. So at that point in time, though, after the conference, basically she mounted a feminist army, they're calling it, and, brought to the attention of everything that was going on in games and Gamergate, glorifying yet again that Gamergate is a misogynist campaign against, women who are trying to get in the industry and speak out about changes that they want to see, which, is entirely bullshit, as I said last week. It's about journalistic integrity. So, a lot of people during that time, of course, felt extremely defeated, but everyone kept pushing, posting out the Gamergate and Not Your Shield hashtags on Twitter. For me, that was pretty uplifting that people just didn't back out, but at the same point in time, things slowed down. Now the part that really gets turned upside down. The article is called Expose, the secret mailing list of the gaming journalism elite. And lo and behold, Milo, Nero on Twitter, got a contact who is a part of a Google Plus discussion group about the journalist circle. Basically, all these journalists
Want to clarify who Milo is for people at home who don't know who that is?
Sorry. Milo Yiannopoulos, I believe his last name is. I can't pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, whatever it is, yes. I love you, Milo, if you're really...
Yeah, I love you. I'm not gay, but, I mean, Milo, you're so dear to my heart for me. I mean, I can't thank you enough for everything you did. Basically, he's a very controversial journalist. He said some very nasty things in the past, about women, specific people of different genders and such, and even video games. But his tone, at least to video games, have changed. He's been active inside the gaming circle, jumping on Gamergate due to interest, and he's actually gone on Twitch TV, which is a game streaming site, to stream some games and talk with people, and he's turning out that he's actually enjoying it. I mean, he gets a lot of views from people from Gamergate and non-Gamergate people, like people who oppose it, to come inside there and, yell at him for what he was doing. But he managed to find a contact inside of this circle and got a dump of things that have been said inside of this. And lo and behold, what do you know? These game journalists this is what the Gamergate people believe.
Basically, for people at home, what's happening is this. There is a secret mailing list where all of these different game journalists, they all use it. And what they're doing, and I'm just trying to clarify because I don't know if it sounds like we're going on a tangent or rambling, but what's happening is that they found this place, they found this mailing list and everything, and found that people are trying to use it to suppress certain kinds of certain parts of information, usually to do with social justice related things, PR, that sort of thing. And it's pretty shifty. I mean, you can go on further with that if you'd like. in detail.
So basically, they're using it to control the flow of information and decide what gets shared, what doesn't get shared, how it gets shared, what the tone is, and things like that.
Yeah.
Yep. And basically, one of the journalists that's inside there said, and I quote, "I would love to use my platform to reapproach this kind of behavior," meaning the behavior of Gamergate and Zoe Quinn. But continuing on, that would go against Zoe Quinn's valid understatement and desire not to have this personal matter publicized by the media. What have they been doing ever since, the conspiracy phase of this? She didn't want to be put in the media, but she's been put in the media. So they completely contradicted themselves just by saying that inside of this circle. And, Zoe basically she constantly puts herself inside of this situation to capitalize by getting more money to her Patreon and basically playing, the strings of other people saying, "I'm so oppressed, people hate me because of reasons they came up with, even though they've been proven true." And lo and behold, these journalists are basically playing to the tune that she wants as well as what they want. Not very many sites, but there have been more sites coming out, have been, reassessing the situation and have been doing some balanced reporting, but it's not enough. And, and
it's not over yet.
Yeah, the disclosure is still not coming there from the biggest offenders, such as, Kotaku, Polygon, and such. Later on, they did another article called "What Drives the Angry Feminist Journalist to Slang Gamergate?" Lo and behold, they are talking about, yes, a very angry journalist who is a feminist, Leah Alexander. And Leah has also been caught deleting previous tweets where she says, stuff about people, like calling people hood rats and such. Things that people have been screen capturing saying, if this is a journalist, why in the hell is she going out publicly and saying these things? She was caught doing it. No one's batting an eye inside the gaming industry, mainly because she's one of the main people inside the circle. And she's also on the list, as far as I'm to understand.
Yeah. Well, can I say something? I mean, I know we can't talk too long about this because we've got a bunch of stuff. But and we've got our main topic. But one of the things that I'm seeing in all of this is, since Moot pulled this stuff, the gloves are off. At first, there was, people were legitimately upset, and they were trying to handle this in a civil way. But you can expect right now, the gloves are off. All the people that are leaving 4chan and going other places, they're not going anywhere. It's round 2, okay?
Well, actually, by this, it's kind of a good thing that people are off of 4chan, at least in my opinion, because that means that people are seeking other avenues to go to, and the actual response is becoming even more louder on Twitter. So more people can come out and say the stuff that they don't agree with. To kind of close the update off, there was another article posted today by Milo. It's the emails that prove video game journalism must be reformed. He basically did a small little data dump talking about some of the posts that were on there. And one of them, which kind of caught my eye right off the bat, was... there's two things that caught my eye, but the big one was William O'Neill, the editor-in-chief of TechRadar, said, and I quote, "Who here hasn't slept with a PR person or a game developer?"
Wow.
What? Jesus.
Oh my god!
That is exactly what was said. And that really goes to show, I mean, like I said before, I think I might have said it in a previous situation, one of the things that is really coming out is that these companies, these game journalist companies, are very small. So what happens is that these people, to make a living, do several different things. They have their fingers in everything. and there's no such thing as a conflict of interest because of that in these different places. They don't forbid them from working with these specific things, and they should have things in place, policies in place saying, no, you're not allowed to do that. That's a conflict of interest, but they don't. And because
I just can't imagine sitting in a room full of
it's deeply incestuous,
sports journalists and
deeply incestuous.
Who here hasn't slept with one of the coaches or a player?
It's almost like they might as well just say who hasn't slept with Zoe Quinn or
oh god,
Okay, no.
Well, there's one last piece to all this, but continue on. I'll get to it afterwards.
Yeah, go on.
Weren't there two men among the 5 who are essentially unidentified? I mean, isn't it
there's theories who they are.
Oh yeah, but isn't it reasonable to
one of them is that it's Maya Kramer
might be one of them?
Which isn't a man, but a woman, and she does PR for Silver String Media.
What gets me is like, okay, yeah, I have had sex with people that I worked with, right? I mean, sometimes it happens, right? But turning that into any kind of anything is like shitting where you eat, right? Like literally any kind of, if it isn't just sex, right? That's all it is, just sex. Not, okay, we're going to have sex and then I'm going to be nice and write this article about you, right? Like that lay woman or whatever her name is, wrote that glowing article about Zoe Quinn and then ended up putting a little freaking addendum on the end of it that, oh, yeah, I was in the middle of a sexual liaison with her at the time or something like that. 3 years after she wrote the article, they tacked that on at the end, right? Once who was going to read the article read it, and nobody's going to go back and look at it now, right? Oh, by the way, I have a conflict of interest here. Just FYI, right? 3 years later or however long it's been, right? Like, there are some things, like me as a waitress having sex with one of the cooks does not become a conflict of interest until he starts giving me extra this, extra that for my staff meal, under the table, blah, 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 whether I ask for it or not. Then it becomes a problem, right? And this is really the thing, right? And this is why it's so hard to police. And, frankly, the whole, I don't even think you need to justify this with saying that there is a proven conflict of interest between Zoe Quinn and the people that she had sex with, right? I don't think you need to prove anything, right? Nobody had to prove that Anthony Weiner was sending dick pics to tobacco lobbyists, right? And then, making juicy deals with them over the pillow, right? No, he just sent dick pics to random women and it cost him his career, right? And he was it was the topic of public conversation for like months, right? The sex was the only story in that case, and the media considered it a story because he was a public figure. Well, Zoe Quinn's a public figure by her own creation. She's not just some random, small, anonymous game dev. She promotes a public persona. She's very much generated a cult of personality around herself, right? How many other indie game devs do you know other than Phil Fish and Zoe Quinn? Does anybody really, can you name, just rattle off, right? Just to the average gamer, just rattle off the names of game developers. Zoe Quinn, like Anita Sarkeesian, she is a personality in the industry, not just an indie game developer. She is a personality in the industry, therefore she's a public figure. Therefore, everything is open to discussion. Everything she does. Whether, look at Gawker, condemning the leaking of her photos, all of this stuff through Kotaku is Gawker Media, isn't it?
Yep.
Meanwhile, they're posting nip-slip photos of Lindsay Lohan.
Well, hell, look what they did to Violent Acres.
Mm-hmm.
After what they did to Violent Acres, after Chin's article on Violent Acres and doxing Violent Acres, they really have no business complaining about anything anybody says about Zoe Quinn.
Oh, well, and the fact that they were doxing Violent Acres because, oh my God, here's this creepy guy whose job it is to keep illegal upskirt photos off of Reddit, right? And he was asked to do it because he does a superb job of it, right? Yeah. Oh my God, what a creep and a misogynist for keeping those illegal upskirt photos off of Reddit. Okay, let's dox him and ruin his life, right? His life, him, a husband and father with a disabled wife and a teenage kid, right? Let's just ruin his life and ruin theirs too, right? For the clicks. And at the same time they were hosting that series of articles, they were hosting beaver shots of Lindsay Lohan and all kinds of, garment mishaps on the part of other, female celebrities because, hey, their nipples and their genitals are everybody's business, right? And let's all gather around and laugh at them because they dared to go commando in public and some paparazzi got a good shot.
Right, let's
Which
go
I
on to the
kind of
news.
wonder if that's always an accident. It gives good publicity.
Whatever, but what a bunch of fucking hypocrites. I am so, I'm sorry, I'm really, really, really annoyed right now because I have been off of 2 days of arguing with people who are just, they cannot be blind to their double standards. They cannot be blind to it, right? They just don't care.
Yeah, they probably are not blind to it.
And they'll say you're
simply
attacking
trying
them
to keep you
when
blind.
you point out.
Well, we got the news. Thanks, Rory, for...
on one final quick note that I didn't get to.
One final one. Okay.
On Yianopolis.net, the actual reporter's website now contains the Zoe Quinn email dump of these people in the industry talking about her. So I wouldn't recommend going there now because so many people are visiting. A lot of people are having problems connecting, and they're probably doing a denial of service attack on a site right now because I can't even see it, but they're out there now. And this kind of just goes to show what Gamergate was standing for journalistic integrity. They morphed into something completely different and took it the wrong way. And all these feminists and all these social justice warriors are latching onto it. And, it was an opportune time for them to make something that it's not when it comes down to it. And, I still say it's not a part of it. Zoe Quinn and Anita and such. But, as long as they keep throwing this fuel in the fire, it's going to remain there, unfortunately. Yeah. But the emails are out.
The thing that bothers me... Oh, go on. The emails are out.
I was just going to say... Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the emails are out now, and now we can see how they made it a part of them. And, I as much as I want to say inside of video game terms, game over, I think that we're just starting to go into part 2 now, and it's just going to become worse. And quite honestly, Gamergate's going to be a long haul, but I think this is just one giant step to victory.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me, though, and it should bother everybody listening, these feminists are not your average, everyday social justice warriors. They DDoS. They know at least enough to find DDoSing software, and they don't give a fuck that that's illegal.
Yeah, no, they don't. And what really gets me this isn't just about journalistic integrity. This is also about social justice warriorism. It's about feminism. It's about not refusing to constantly protecting women, refusing to hold them accountable, right? And when I don't know how many people have seen Steve Tom Sawyer's YouTube video. It's only about 3 minutes long. And he came out a few days ago, did a video. He was extremely emotional. He was crying about how grateful he is that all of this is coming out because he is a game developer who has been working for years in the industry. And it has been such a hostile, toxic environment for him as somebody who does not buy into so many of the political stances that are taking it over, right? And taking it over in all of the positions in authority. feminists don't just post on they don't post on 4chan. They don't bother to post on 4chan. What they do is they recruit the moderators of 4chan, right? And then they control who posts on 4chan, right? That's what feminists do. They don't just post on Twitter, right? They insist on being part of the team that moderates Twitter, that trains moderators for Twitter, right?
Yeah.
You know,
this is people.
This is
One
how
thing-
they
people.
Just to add
Well,
on to that, Zoe Quinn is actually dating a moderator from 4chan now.
Yeah, there you
got
go.
pictures of that. Yeah, that's the
There
guy
you
who
go.
was beside
Oh my
her on the computer on B on V. You know that famous picture that's famous now. That was them with the computer in a bar around the exact same time with the Polytron hack. So they were there at that time on the computer, and around the exact same time. We don't know what the hell's going on with that, but it's a real mess. And the former members of 4chan are pissed, and they're not going to take it anymore. And now we finally have to move over to the news, because otherwise we're never going to get off of this. All right, okay. Hannah, you want to take that up?
Yep. All right, so... No, it doesn't want to open. There we go. Go to the doctor, get arrested for a DV. Based on the findings of a survey that 1 in 5 men admit to violence against their partner, the popular medical website WebMD is reporting that medical professionals are considering including screening male patients as perpetrators of domestic violence alongside female patients as victims. When people think of men who abuse their partners, they often think of violent people who they have never come across or people they have only heard about in the news, says author Vijay, I believe this is Singh, a clinical lecturer in the Departments of Emergency Medicine and Family Medicine at the University of Michigan Medical School, said in a university news release. However, our study showed that 1 out of every 5 men in the U.S. reported physical violence toward an intimate partner. It's likely that we've all met these men in our daily environment. How will doctors identify their abusive patients to potentially turn them over to the authorities for investigation? Well, the same study published in the Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine reports that men who are abusive tend to have associated health problems for which they visit the doctor more frequently. Alongside the obvious ones like substance abuse and witnessing or experiencing violence as a child, having irritable bowel syndrome and insomnia are also, according to these esteemed researchers, telltale signs among men. I can't do this with a straight face. I read this earlier. Telltale signs. Irritable bowel syndrome.
Well,
seriously?
Yeah, no, totally.
Obviously, getting beaten up is a shitty experience, but for Pete's
it makes your bowel irritable.
I suppose, telltale signs among men that are associated. This obviously has to be an idiot study. How do you get irritable bowel syndrome as a cause for domestic violence? Telltale signs among men that are associated with a higher risk of intimate partner violence. So now, not only do male patients have to be concerned that they will be suspected criminals if they tell their doctor about abuse they suffered in the past, they have to be wary of reporting even more common and mundane problems not directly connected with violence at all. And what about women, you ask? How many women report being violent to their partners, and what health problems are associated with it? The study did not ask. But given the vast amount of other research that relies on asking women these questions to show that women are just as likely to be abusive in relationships as men are, the frequency must be nearly equal. But doctors don't need to know about that. Profiling innocent men as crime suspects based on their symptoms doesn't seem to be the best solution for closing the large gap between men's and women's health and life expectancies, but that has never been a priority for the use of men's tax dollars anyway. I think we could probably discuss this one a little bit before we go on to the next one. I just personally do not think a study can be done very well if they are associating it's not specifically a mundane disorder so much as it is a completely unrelated disorder
you go
with
into the doctor,
violence.
you're like, doctor, I think I have gout, and he yells, wife beater!
Yeah, what better way to, they're always complaining, men never go to the doctor, men never go to the doctor. Well, now they're really going to want to go, aren't they?
Oh my god.
What a freaking bizarre world. Jesus Christ.
And then you have, I'm not going to say idiots, because I don't think he's an idiot about everything, okay? I think he's just an idiot about this particular issue. The David Packman, who did an interview, I did an interview with him the other day, basically saying, well, but feminism, the dictionary definition is the movement for social, political, and economic equality for women. End of story, right? And any kind of research, any kind of policy, that's all irrelevant. Right? Because it's the movement for political, social, and economic equality for women.
Yeah. Dictionary thumpers.
Like, oh my god. And then they're the first people who tell you that they say, you say something and they say, get a dictionary, and then you actually post the dictionary definition and it's exactly what you used it as, and then they're like, you're a subhuman hack.
Yeah.
Oh my god, like the level of dishonesty, and this is, and moral inconsistency. This is really it. I mean, like if feminists were to be morally consistent, right? One of the very first things that would have happened when the Zoe Quinn revelations came to light would have been that she was actually taken advantage of by people in the industry who had a lot more power than her. And it was actually an issue of sexual harassment, and her consent was invalid, right? And she was the victim of these journalists. But the journalists themselves are ideologically pure, so they couldn't do that. They couldn't make it rapey, right? And still maintain their political position, right?
No.
Because they don't have any moral consistency. And it's the same thing with, well, why don't men go to the doctor? The men live shorter lives because they just refuse to go to the doctor. But let's make going to the doctor as unpleasant and potentially hazardous and life-ruining as we possibly can for a man by indicating that suffering from irritable bowel syndrome probably means...
Or insomnia. Or any of those things.
Oh my god, I have insomnia, doctor. What have you been doing to your wife?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, yeah, it's completely ridiculous. Go on.
I see your name's in the chat.
Yes,
Speak
it
up.
is. I was just going to say a little bit. It really is completely ridiculous. I mean, when you say the thing, a lot of people have, just sleep problems. Can you imagine you're an insomniac, and you go into the doctor, and you're like, listen, doc, I have not slept in 2 weeks. This is terrible. Can you help me out? And they're like, have you been beating your wife? Have you been doing it? Is that why you can't sleep? Because you can't live with yourself?
Yeah. Or have you been beating your wife? Why? Does that help? Will it make me sleepy? I'll try it.
Oh, yeah, this isn't getting a quote mined at all.
I have a prescription for that.
Quote mining. Quote mining is rape. I didn't ask to be penetrated that way.
It's like medicinal marijuana. I just need the piece of paper to show the cops when they arrive.
I have irritable bowel syndrome. Do you beat your wife? No, it's not because dinner is bad. I just have irritable bowel syndrome.
Oh my god. Good grief. All right. I can't.
On to the next story.
Yeah.
Okay. This one is even worse. Well, yeah, even worse. A man is suing. This is just insane. This one actually takes us back to journalism. In quotes, of course. A man is suing his nurse for initiated unsolicited sexual relations, including intercourse, claiming that she took advantage of him while he was doped up on meds in a hospital bed awaiting a heart transplant. The same nurse had been previously fired from a job for crossing professional boundaries with a patient. Wait a minute, what the heck is unsolicited sex? Don't we have another word for that? Rape? Apparently this is not rape, according to NBC Chicago, who reported the story. what word would they have used to describe a male medical staff member having unsolicited sex with an intoxicated female heart patient? This wording is, however, perfectly in keeping with legal definitions of rape, which only allow for victims who are penetrated, not forced to penetrate someone else. If the allegations are found to be true, this case will not make it into the official statistics on rape due to these feminist-influenced definitions. Thus, by excluding male and female victims of female rapists, erasing female perpetrators, feminists have guaranteed that rape will be seen as a gendered crime, keeping the fires of public outrage burning so they can maintain their influence over public policy and their generous levels of government funding. One thing I will say is on this is it won't erase all female perpetrators, because some female perpetrators against both men and women do penetrate. They just don't do it for sexual gratification. They do it because they're doing what they're doing to hurt the victim. So there will be a few in that statistic, but the majority of female perpetrators aren't going to do that and will not be counted in the statistics.
How do you manage to get away with this, though, in the first place? You're calling it, you've made up a word to describe it instead of just calling what it is, which is rape. You know, she took advantage.
Outrage for
she
male
took advantage of a guy who is doped up on medication, who's got a heart condition. Isn't that like the worst thing you could possibly do? Is arouse them when they have when they have a heart condition? Isn't that like the worst thing you could possibly do?
Well, he was getting ready for. Wasn't he getting ready? I mean,
okay. Yeah, but he's got an issue beforehand.
You definitely don't want to get them all worked up right before that. No.
But it's the rape part that's wrong.
The really bad thing is the fact that she felt entitled to just do that to him. That
Oh, do you guys remember that scene? You remember that scene from The World According to Garp?
Oh,
yes,
yeah. Oh, my gosh,
I was thinking of that.
Where she's describing how she got pregnant with her son to this old guy, and just as she's telling this story, and she's telling it just so fondly. You know, it's like just a fond memory of what she did, and almost in the romantic sense, right? And then he just has this look of horror on his face. He's like, my God, you raped him. You raped him, right? And she's completely shocked.
What he says is, you raped a dying man?
Yeah, you raped a dying man. And she looks completely shocked at that suggestion. Like, I did not. I did.
Well,
how do you even
tried to excuse it.
Of course
she tried to excuse it. She tried to say that because he says the word good. She said, oh, yeah, one of his last words was good. Like, but if he's that out of it, if he's so unaware that he has no idea what's going on and can't fight back and can't refuse.
Regardless of whether what he said afterward was good, she didn't have his consent, right? I mean, he may have enjoyed every minute.
He was unable to consent, right? He was unable to refuse. So even, and so can you have someone's consent if they are in a position where they cannot refuse?
Nope. They're all about, these feminists are all about verbal consent, affirmative consent. This is totally rape
only from
by that definition.
Only from women. They're only about it for women. They do not care if men consent to sex with women.
Yeah, they don't. They don't. And then if men were to say no, when men say no to them, they get pissed off. How dare you, misogynist, tell me that I can't do whatever I want with your body?
Usually it's are you gay? Is usually the first thing that they say. They're like, are you gay? Why wouldn't you want any of this?
Well, is
there something wrong with you?
And it's abuse. That's what you'll hear from it. It's called withholding sex, and it's abuse.
Well, I think actually with women who ask, "Are you gay?" It is actually because women are considered to have higher mate value on average than men, just in general innately. That when a woman is rejected by a man, when she actually takes the risky first step of making her intentions clear, right? So there is no ambiguity. There's no plausible deniability involved anymore. She's making her intentions clear, and he rejects her, right? She needs to do something to recover her social standing, right? To maintain her higher mate values. So the first thing she does is she will emasculate him and basically say, well, I wouldn't want to have sex with you anyway, loser. Are you gay? You must be gay, right? She needs to recover. It's an impulse to recover the perception of the people surrounding that you aren't low value. I mean, this guy, right, who's nobody's just a schmuck, rejected you. Oh my God, you know, how low value a person are you if you got rejected by this guy, right? They need to actually assert their dominance in that situation, and there's an impulse to assert a certain sexual dominance in the situation, and call him gay, and call him micro-peened, and call him all kinds of things, right? And emasculate.
That's terrible.
Oh, it is. It's like it's an instinctive thing, right? It's as instinctive behavior on the part of women as slut shaming, right? I mean, it's all based on competitive sexual selection strategies, right? It's just nobody ever examines them in the context of that, right? And if you don't examine those behaviors in the context in which they actually evolve and how they actually operate, you're never going to solve them. You're never going to get over them or get past them or help anybody to really be able to see them for what they are. So.
Yeah. I guess we'll go into the show segments then. Unless anybody else has anything to say.
Nope.
Anybody? Final thoughts? Okay. Oh, geez. We have two things here. Do you guys want to go dive headfirst to the main topic, or do you want to go to the other? I think we'll go to the shorter one quickly, because we're going to have a lot to say about the fatherhood one, and I know we'll probably never get to the next one if we don't. All right. Physical activity improves academic ability in boys. A Finnish study published this month may shed some light on the problems boys face in education. The study found that boys with higher levels of physical activity learn better than their more sedentary peers. However, greater physical activity contributed to worse scores in arithmetic for girls. This is just the most recent study pointing to a fundamental difference in the ways boys and girls learn. If this is correct, then a portion of the problems boys face in education could be attributed to the increasingly sedentary style of teaching that has taken root in the U.S. education system. It has been theorized that boys are more hands-on and crave a more active learning experience, whereas girls are more comfortable in a calm learning environment due to higher levels of serotonin and oxytocin. Perhaps it's time that we consider these kinds of accommodations if we have any hope of bridging the education gap. So let's talk about that. This basically the study is saying that they took a look at 107 boys, grades 1 through 3, and they followed them and gave some of them more recess time and encouraged them to be more active. And the ones that were ended up doing noticeably better in reading and math and those things. What do you guys have to say?
Right, I've heard of these studies where there are schools that started with like gym in the morning or something like that, where it would be where they would get their energy out and it would be easier for them or worked better for them. Now there's a big attack on, and I think we spoke about this I think a little bit at one point, on the trades, like and how that really helps boys, but feminists attack that. So I think we were speaking earlier on how definitely there's different ways for boys and girls to learn as in general. Of course, there will be individuals who there's exceptions, but the things that help boys learn are under attack by feminists who say if it doesn't fit what girls need, pretty much the way they they attack it is if it's not fitting specifically what girls need, then it doesn't exist. They completely just, boys just don't matter to them at all. What would help boys is just, it just doesn't matter. And it's wrong.
Yeah, it is. But it's also not entirely new information. And I know this simply because of an incident that occurred when I was a kid. My brother was coming home from school and getting in trouble for misbehaving at home. And it wasn't his usual kind of behavior at all. He was grouchy about, things like doing his chores, and he was like, I haven't gotten to play all day, and Mom looked at him finally one day and she's like, you had 3 recesses today. What are you talking about? And, he said, no, I don't get any of my recesses because I do my schoolwork too slow. When we found out his teacher was keeping him in at recess to finish classroom work because he was doing it more meticulously than the other kids in class. The kids would rush through their homework and go play outside. And he was being careful and making sure he did everything correctly, and he didn't get to go play outside. And it was actually, it changed his personality. And that was as just as a little boy. So my father was a teacher in the school system, and he had the school board policy book. And in the school board policy book at that time, it said that teachers could not use withholding recess as a punishment for minor infractions like that. They could keep the kids after school, and back then they were allowed to paddle, but they could not keep the kids in at recess because they had found, as a community, as a school community, they had found that it affected the children's behavior, that children were more likely to behave and keep themselves under control in the classroom if they were allowed to go outside and play, and they were encouraged to actually play at recess and not just stand around and talk. And that was the early 80s. And here we are in, more than a decade into the 21st century, and they're having to do a study to figure out that children need to play sometimes. I mean, How did we get that stupid? How did our educators forget that much?
Oh, well, one of the things too, right, is that it as Crystal mentioned, yes, it helps boys. It doesn't seem to help girls as much, and therefore it doesn't need to exist. But it's not just that, right? Because a lot of the play that boys engage in at recess is sort of impromptu, rounds of capture the flag or tag or, competitive games, impromptu competitive
always used
games.
To play full tackle football at my school for recess in the grass.
And these are games that even if girls want to play, and there will always be a small number of girls who want to play, and they're generally welcome as long as they want to play by the same rules as the boys, right? But there will always be girls who feel like the fact that the rules are not what they would have, right? And therefore they don't want to play because they don't want to play by those rules, those competitive rules where people keep score, and when somebody breaks the rules, the other person gets a do-over, right? And they're very, very, very quick, boys are to expel a member of the group for cheating and all of these things, right? They're extremely rule conscious even at that age, and they will rib each other about throwing like a girl and stuff like that. And if a girl can't handle all of that, right, then she is expelled just like any of the boys would be, right? And from the group. And so you have girls who feel like there are boys doing, and I think this is an instinctive impulse on the part of females wanting to horn in on male-dominated activities. I think that Gamergate and all of atheism and all of these other things have indicated that this may be somewhat of a human universal on the part of women. And change the rules and turn the entire activity to suit herself. I think there are some women, some girls who are definitely about this. And keeping score makes girls feel bad. Keeping score isn't cooperative, it's competitive, and it doesn't suit girls. In fact, girls act as if it harms them. I don't think it harms them, but they act as if it does, and they complain as if it does. And therefore, right, so many of those competitive, and then, of course, as well, oh my goodness, possible injuries and lawsuits, right? We have to get rid of these rough and tumble games that boys play, right? And one of the really horrible things is that they've done research in New Zealand, I believe it is. They finally found 4 schools who were willing to actually take the risk and participate in the study and get rid of all rules at recess. And a couple of the schools even got rid of adult supervision at recess, right? And basically let the kids, if the kid wanted to skateboard, they skateboarded. If the kid wanted to climb a tree, he climbed a tree. If they wanted to play with old tires and dirty old pieces of scrap lumber and build a fort, that's what they did. They found the number of injuries at those schools went down when they allowed kids to just play. Without all the rules, without all the bans, without all the you're not allowed to play tag because it causes skinned knees and encourages aggression, right? Without all of those restraints in place, they found that kids injured themselves less often, right? So we're not just hurting boys in the psychological sense. We're actually, our obsession with constraining children's play and making it conform to what girls find comfortable is hurting our kids physically.
Yep. And kowtowing or accommodating, I guess, that desire for everything to feel fair in girls is probably the worst thing they could do to the girls, too.
Oh, yeah.
Although it's secondary, they're not the primary victims of this, it's still a rotten thing to do to a little girl, a teacher that everything should be fair or feel fair. That's even worse.
These girls are going to grow up with a skin as thick as the cell membrane on a paramecium, right? Yeah. Like, it just, like, they are not going to be able to handle the real world. And I think we're seeing, because the generation of both men and women who have become adults over the last 5 or 10 years are the first generation who grew up with the self-esteem movement.
Oh God, yeah.
And they cannot handle real life. They just can't. They cannot handle when the world is unfair.
Yeah. There's a fair number of them that have that problem.
God, most of them. They're like, what? Yeah. What? You want me to do things myself?
The ones who grew up in poor environments where they didn't get the fairness that they expected had to learn otherwise.
Yeah.
Right.
But those that had privilege.
I almost feel there should be accommodations, that there really should be, maybe go so far as having boy-only classrooms. And I say that because if they need a different learning style, and certain styles of learning are better for girls, and maybe that's something that should be done. It's just, I wonder about, but it's not going to ever happen, though. Not with the way things are right now.
The thing is, boys and girls do work together in their learning, and they can complement each other in their learning. They can bounce off each other in their learning, but only if the administration that they are dealing with, the teachers and the school administrators, the school board, the influencers of curriculum, which honestly, the education system is the only union shop I know where the union actually decides how the product is going to be produced. They're designing the product. Because that's the education system allows the teachers' union to set curriculum. And that's just ridiculous.
Oh, that is absolutely obscene.
And it is. It really is. It needs to get back to... In fact, I think at this point, because of what it's turned into in the United States, the students would be better off if the federal Department of Education were completely abolished in its current form, and something else created in its stead.
I don't know that there should be a federal Department of Education.
There really doesn't have to be a full department that makes the decisions and everything. A communication system that the local education systems could use to keep up with what each other's doing would be great. But an administration that tells them what to do has just wrecked everything.
Well, because it's so far removed. It's like communist Russia, when you have one guy in the Kremlin saying, okay, it's October 21st, everybody harvest. Doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter whether, it's possible. Everybody from one end of the country to another, you all harvest now, because that's what I say.
That's big government is essentially a corporation. It is just a different type of corporation.
Well, and it's not beholden to its consumers in the same way as a corporation is, because it can, it's basically like if Apple could just come into your house, right, shove a substandard product in your hand, and then, take your TV as payment.
Yep.
Right? And Apple gets to decide how much you are going to pay. However much they decide, you are going to pay it. You don't have a choice. You have to buy the service, and
how much you get to use that service, and what you get to do while you're using it.
Yep.
And who you get to use it with and interact with on it. Oh yeah, that's pretty much it.
If you want to call corporations evil, and corporations, there's a lot to complain about with corporations, but if you want to call them evil, they wield nowhere near the amount of power that the government does to coerce people into doing things that are bad for them, that aren't necessary for them, and then stick them with the bill for it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we've got our topic. You ready?
I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Disappearance of fatherhood. The general opinion of people in the West is that fathers are obsolete, that fathers are simply not needed to raise children. The law has reduced the role of fatherhood down to his wallet, and with the rise of no-fault divorce, women have no incentive to mend broken relationships. What many women do not understand is that when they are denying custody rights to their ex-spouses is the way that it will affect their children. From a statistical standpoint, one of the greatest factors in determining a future of criminal or delinquent behavior is the absence of a father figure. Fatherless children are at a greater risk of developing dependency on drugs and alcohol. 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 71% of school dropouts and 90% of homeless and runaway children grow up in this way. While those statistics are often debated, there are undeniable facts about single motherhood that neither liberals or conservatives can argue against, which is that female-headed households with single mothers at the front are 5 to 6 times more likely to be poverty-stricken and have less upward mobility than intact families. Upward mobility being the determination of how likely a family is to move up an economic class. This means that regardless of whether women are receiving child support, they still have a tendency to do worse economically than a family where the father is present. But the presence of fathers goes beyond economics, which is not the narrative that the political left wants to hear. They are deeply invested in the idea that the presence of a father figure is not important in the overall development of a child, that men are the aggressors that need to be pushed out. Maybe when the problem spirals out of control, people will decide to reconsider what is in the best interest of the child. All right.
I love how they have that excuse. The best interests of the child, and then they do everything in the world that hurt the child. And that they seems to be more in the best interests of the government or the mother.
Yeah.
And
it's not the mother, though.
Well,
it's
the damage that happens, it's not really that great for the mother either, no. But there are a lot of women who do believe that it is. But the damage that's done in these kids' lives really, it's, we focus on the father's right to see his children and have a relationship with his children, and that's partly because we're focused on men's rights. But the other end of that is kids have the right to a relationship with both parents. Children need both parents whenever it's possible. And, it's one thing to agree that a parent has the right to walk away. And, if that's going to happen, it's better for the child if we do not pressure the parent, because it just sets the child up for all kinds of worlds of disappointment if the parent, shows up periodically and then doesn't care. But to take a loving, caring, wanting desperately to be there parent out of a child's life the way that happens so often in divorce these days is no different than beating that child every day. It's just not as visible and readily understood as a form of abuse.
Well, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think that as well, the whole idea of, of giving women what they say they want, right? I mean, if you actually look at a child that's totally out of control, right? A child that is completely out of control, when you actually put your foot down and set boundaries with them and say you will behave in a reasonable way, right? The child becomes much happier, right? It is not in the child's best interest to be able to act in a tyrannical way. A child who is tyrannical with its parents, with its siblings, everything else, right? This is not a happy child. This is not a happy, well-adjusted child, right? And putting your foot down often will actually, just the mere act of putting your foot down and setting some boundaries will help contain that child's feelings of antagonism and all of that and make them feel happy, right? Feel okay with things. It's the most amazing thing. The few times that I've had to do this with one of my own kids, right? All of a sudden, they're not miserable anymore. They're just happy. They feel better, right? Their world is no longer limitless, right? And their power is no longer limitless. Their power to hurt others and pester others and torture others, torment others, right? And I think that when you give these high conflict women everything that they want, it doesn't make them any happier. It doesn't make them any healthier, right? All it does, it all just goes into this huge black hole. And this applies to high conflict men as well. It'll go into this huge black hole that is crying out not for being, not to be catered to and pandered to, but is crying out for somebody to set a limit on their behavior, right? I think that people with no boundaries seek boundaries. They seek them, and if they don't find them, right, it doesn't make them happy. It's not in their best interest, right? And so I think basically it's not good for the fathers, it's not good for the kids, it's not even good for the mothers. It's not even in their best interests. Yeah. It may be in their stated interests, but it's not in their best interests.
Having no boundaries is like wandering around in the dark. It's as intimidating as wandering around in the dark because you don't know what you're going to run into. You don't know what kind of consequences are going to befall you. You don't have any boundaries. You don't have any reference point by which to determine your own course of action.
Exactly. I mean, this is really the thing. It makes people feel lost, untethered, right? It's like, it'd be like, I would equate it to floating in space in an EVA suit as opposed to standing on the ground, right? I mean, yes, there may be some emotional rushes that you get out of exercising that immense power that comes with no consequences ever, seemingly.
For about 5 minutes.
Right? But it doesn't make you happy because you're not even standing on the ground. You're untethered to you have been untethered from reality. But and as far as, boys especially growing up without fathers, there are significant harms to girls, and I don't want to dismiss them or disregard them or anything. But when you're talking about boys, I mean, like, I really wish somebody would do a study and find out how many self-identified male feminists grew up without fathers, because part of me feels like a male feminist's entire social identity as a worthwhile person is formed in a childhood completely populated by women. Their mother, their grandmother, their teachers, their daycare workers, their babysitters. They never learned to care about male approval because they didn't need to, because there were no males in their lives, no strong male role models, no men setting any kind of boundaries. In the preschool years, when their personalities were developing, it was all women. And because they weren't exposed to masculine ways of being in their early years, when they hit school and they get hit in the face with masculine culture, that culture that I was talking about on the playground with competitive games and you throw like a girl, and if you don't abide by the rules and suck it up and not whine, you're out. You're not playing with us, right? You're off the team. That seems like an intense injustice to them. It doesn't seem like what it is, which is boys instinctively testing each other as far as building on traits that are already innate in them and developing them and reinforcing them, right? Traits that are necessary if you're going to hunt mastodon, or if you're going to team up and fend off invaders, or if you're going to defend your women or whatever, right? All of those traits that men have needed in the past, and they have these evolved mechanisms to, they are born with the roots of them, and they have evolved mechanisms to build them up in each other, right? They didn't have a dad to tell them that's just what boys do. Maybe try slugging one of them, right? If he yo mamas you, just yo mama him back, right back. The testing that boys instinctively do with each other, it just was seen as mean, as bullying, toxic, right? If they didn't have any kind of masculine influence in those preschool years. And so now they don't want male approval because they see masculinity as toxic, right? Or they go in the other direction and all they do is seek male approval no matter how toxic, and they join gangs, right? So, I mean, it basically, they grow up in this padded feminine world, and masculine culture hits them in the face, and any interest they might have had in belonging to that just went away, because affirmation and validation for them are the products of feminine arbiters. They just are, right? And they wouldn't want any part of those, what those boys' approval, because those boys are toxic and mean, right? And it is a recipe for self-destructive behavior, like gang membership, seeking out masculine role models no matter how toxic they are, or a recipe for self-loathing.
I would agree.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And let's really talk about, for a moment, the agenda that is present in sitting there and having fathers, or considering them to be obsolete and saying that they're not needed. The agenda is that if we don't say that there's no difference in the way that kids are as a result of how they're brought up or who brings them up, then that is going to offend all the non-traditional families. That is exactly what is taking place. And to be perfectly honest, I think that the reasons, and this is just my opinion, I think that the reasons why same-sex couples have success with children are from different factors, because oftentimes they have the ability to plan more than heterosexual couples often have. I mean, you look at a good portion of heterosexual couples with children, a lot of times, they had accidents. They didn't really adequately have enough time to plan. But whereas you see same-sex couples, they have longer times to plan. They plan it out, they adopt, and usually they have more income overall when they decide to have children.
I think
So when
Basically, they do the same things that increase the success of child rearing when heterosexual couples do them.
Well,
Exactly.
and they also, I think they also have a more conscientious attitude toward it, and therefore, if it's two women, they'll go out of their way to make sure that, you know, there's a favorite uncle in there to provide some kind of masculine presence in their kid's life, or a grandfather or whatever. And the same with gay men. They'll go out of their way to make sure that there's some kind of feminine influence, positive feminine role model who is going to be responsible and a large part of the kid's life, right? I think that when same-sex parents take those steps, when they do it out of a sense of conscientiousness, they do it out of a sense of, I'm really lucky to have this kid, right?
Yeah.
This kid, you know, I had to work really hard to get this kid, and I'm not going to fuck it up. Right, as opposed to, oops, I forgot to take my pills.
Exactly. And that's the difference there. I'm echoing on someone's end. Am I still? All right.
Not mine.
Yeah, I thought I was for a moment. But anyway, I think that is really what's at work here, is people feel that they have to, in valuing fathers, that they will somehow offend all of these people who don't match up. But you really do see that they do make a difference, that fathers, and really what this is committed parenting, and you really do need those, you know, both parents to be involved. And you are seeing the situation where they are not enforcing these child custody situations, these agreements that they have set out and saying, okay, I get the kid 50% of the time, or I get to see the kid on the weekend. They're not even upholding that. I think I remember they were looking at, I think it was in Texas, and they took a look at how many of these custody agreements had been enforced with police. And I think it was something like 2 or 3 over the past couple of years.
Well, enforcing custody is a net drain on finances. I mean, enforcing child support is like it's a windfall. It's just nothing but money for state governments, right? Because they not only get to recoup all of the dollars that they may have paid out and they would otherwise pay out in welfare benefits, right? But they also get a dollar for dollar payout from the federal government for each dollar of child support they collect. So, of course, they're going to be really, really, really eager to collect those child support dollars, right? But when it comes to enforcing custody arrangements and visitation, right, all that is cost. All that is red ink. Nothing but red ink for them, right?
Yeah.
And all you need to basically convince somebody, don't spend those huge flippin' great wads of cash you don't want to spend anyway, because here, let me give you some glib rationale as to why it would harm the children if you actually spent that money. Oh, wow, you've convinced me.
Yeah. And they just keep fighting shared parenting. Go on, Hannah.
It's not really, they don't really, it's not so much in the interest of the children as much as it is in the interest of feeding the machine. In that, when it comes to the Health and Human Services Department, it's really a self-perpetuating poverty machine. It depends on increasing poverty in order to continue to bring in the money that pays the caseworkers, that pays the administrators. The administrators make a lot of money. That keeps the buildings going, all that. They can't have people's lives improving. They can't even have people treading water. This has to continue growing. And so they've got the perfect formula for it. And they have to know that, at least at the higher levels. They're not going to change anything because it's just...
Well, it helps government grow. It helps justify their jobs and their increasing paychecks and their golden parachute retirement plans, right? And
their
what
bonuses?
Really
they get bonuses for adopting kids out.
Yeah. No, what gets me is, like, I was reading because there was one state, I forget which state it is, Georgia maybe, that is moving from they used to give you the option of direct deposit or paper checks for any government check. And then they decided, in order to save money, austerity measures, they were going to eliminate paper checks entirely. Now, men who were having their disability checks garnished, right, to the tune of 80% to pay child support, okay, they were getting paper checks because the child support agency can only take 80% of your check, okay? That's the most they can take. So these men would get their child support checks. One of them that they interviewed, he was living with the adult son he was paying child support for, and his adult son was supporting him. And all of the money was going to the government to repay the government for the welfare benefits this kid's mother collected when he was still a child. Okay, so none of the money was going to the kid, right? And his kid was stuck supporting him. And he was on disability. 80% of his check was being garnished. And he got it in a paper check form because then he could take it to a check cashing place, right, and receive his 20% of his disability check that was left after the government had its way with it. But child support agencies who can only take 80% of a person's check can take 100% of a person's bank account. So the moment they switched to direct deposit, they basically made it so that men who were on disability, men who were on welfare, right, because government can't garnish a welfare check, but the government can seize 100% of your bank account, okay? Men who were on any kind of state benefits because they were unable to work were now completely penniless because the child support agency, as soon as the money would be deposited in their account, the child support agency had every right to take every penny of it. Right? This is how obscene it's getting. Right? This is how absurd it's getting. That this man was, I mean, he didn't complain when he only had 20% of his disability check to live off of and he was dependent on his grown son, right? He only complained when that became 100% of his money going to repay the government for welfare benefits that his ex collected when he was, unable to pay when his son was a child.
Makes you kind of wonder if we ought to go back to England's old poor laws. There, after the bubonic plague, there was a law passed because people were sort of capitalizing on the scarcity of workers. England had a welfare system. I'm not telling this very in order here. England had kind of a welfare system because was King Henry wanted his divorce, and he went after the Catholic Church. I think I've got the right king here. He went after the Catholic Church. He went after the monasteries, and you have to read about the dissolution of the monasteries for that. But because he did that, he destroyed the Catholic Church's welfare system for the poor, and the government had to take over welfare essentially. And what was happening was people were who were able-bodied were depending on welfare so that they could command higher wages for their skilled labor that not everybody could do, and traveling the country demanding the highest wage they possibly could for their skilled labor. Essentially, they were scalping, so they came up with a law to combat this, that you could not collect welfare if you were capable of working and you were just not doing it, because at that time the population was low enough and the work was in demand enough that they didn't really have a lot of people who could not find work. You actually had to be broken down and disabled or damaged or injured or whatever to not to be infirm to not be exempt from, or to be exempt from this. And you could actually be imprisoned if you refused to work your trade and tried to rely on welfare.
Well, I think that maybe that should be a thing, like if you can work, and if there's work available and you choose not to, just because there's this other option.
And women were not exempt. This was everybody,
If a woman was a tradesperson, I'm certain she would not be exempt. And contrary to what feminists will tell you, that there were women trades. There were smiths and silversmiths and cobblers and freaking brewers. Actually, the surname Brewster and the surname Webster came from the fact that so many people who brewed beer and wove cloth as tradespeople, master craftsmen, were women. Right? Because the suffix "ster" is a female suffix.
Yeah.
Wow. You learn something new every day. That I did not know.
The idea that women worked in coal mines in England.
Women.
It was the suffix. I didn't know.
While they were pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah. There were things that women did in coal mines in England that they did because they had smaller hands and smaller bodies and could fit into smaller areas, smaller dugout areas, and reach into smaller cracks and crevices and things like that. And even when they were pregnant, they did this work. I found it online a long time ago, and I used to have a bookmark for it, but I do not have the bookmark anymore.
Then during the Industrial Revolution, due to the advocacy and the lobbying of mostly upper-class women, this type of work was deemed unsuitable for women, and so it fell to boys.
Yep.
Women were barred, and feminists will scream blue murder about how women were barred from going underground. Women were barred. They weren't allowed to go because of the law. Well, who made the law? Well, it was men who made the law, but it was at upper-class women's behest, just like child labor laws were enacted because women decided that allowing children to work in coal mines was unjust and it was harmful to kids, right? Mostly upper-class women because they had no idea of the circumstances that most lower-class people were in, wherein you're a poor family, you have lots of kids, you have an 8-year-old boy or girl, and you send them to work in a factory because that is what is necessary for that kid to eat.
Yeah.
Right? That's your option. You send them to work, right? And upper class women, they cared about the children so much, right, that they barred the children from having certain jobs, and this led to lower class families being put into some extremely dire straits, just because of the difference in class perspective, the difference in the options available. I mean, like, there's no upper class woman who would have even thought that a kid would need a job in order to actually have, 3 square meals a day, or even 3 shitty meals a day of cabbage and potatoes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and now today's situation kind of reflects that, although whether it is a good thing or a bad thing or a case-by-case thing to keep children from having any kind of job. I did work when I was a kid. I didn't have a job, but I had, and I had classmates who worked harder than me. I had chores and I had things that I did to contribute to my family's business, and all of it was pretty much voluntary for me because my family wasn't poor. But I had classmates that were farmers that would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do chores before getting ready for school, and then they'd come home from school and do chores before supper, and then they'd do chores again before bed, because if they didn't, the animals would die, or there would be other problems on the farm.
I almost wonder if kids need to be doing some of these things earlier on, if they maybe need to learn a trade earlier or something like that. I'm not talking about something heavy, but to just have something to fall back on would be so helpful to these young people nowadays, because they often do have
my hands when I was 2.
Yeah. Well, I actually think that our education system, the way it is right now, is and the way it has been for the last probably 50, 60 years, is completely unsuited to real life. Like, not every kid needs to matriculate. not every kid is suitable to matriculate. Like, not every kid is suitable to get the high school education that is necessary to go to university. Some kids, right? My grandmother had a grade 8 education. She became postmistress of her town. She ran the general store. She ran an entire wing of a department store. She kicked butt with a grade 8 education. She was extremely, extremely competent, right? Most of the jobs that are available to people with high school diplomas could be done by people with a grade 8 education.
That's true.
Okay. And as far as I'm concerned, by grade 8, you're old enough to be able to read and comprehend a newspaper. You're old enough, you have enough education to be able to make change, to be able to balance a checkbook if you have to be able to do all of the things that you would normally have to do in your life. And at that point, I think there should be a multitude of options in education that take you in different directions based on your desire and your competencies, right, your talents, whether it's toward the university path, toward technical school, vocational education, all of those things. Not everybody in the world is going to need a grade 12 level of English and social studies. They're just not. Not if they want to be a plumber, right? They're just not, right? And with the ubiquity of the educational tools that you can find on the internet for free, if you want to be self-educated, if you want to be a plumber who took the plumber track or the pipe fitter track in grade 8, right, and didn't really take academics any further than that except for what was absolutely needed for your trade that you chose, right? If you want to educate yourself in sociology or art history or whatever, there's plenty of resources online that cost nothing to anybody.
They're making it far more difficult for people to do apprenticeships and things like that. They need you to do more and more certifications, where you can't just go and test out of it. You have to go through some college classes to actually get certified for some of these things.
Oh, and you have to go through a certification program to be authorized to operate the piece of machinery you've been operating for a living for 30 years, right? Yep. I know a guy. He's been operating a grader. So basically, he builds logging roads in the summer, and he plows them in the winter. That's what he does. That's all he's done for 30 years. He's done it for 4 different logging companies. Every 2 years, he has to go through a safety certification, a written test. He has to go through an evaluation. Were there any incidents? Blah, 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 blah. Perfectly pristine, clean record across the board. He dropped out of high school in grade 10 to go to work, right? He's been working steady for 30 years, exemplary record. He went and he applied, this is in British Columbia, he went and applied for a job in Fort McMurray, Alberta for one of the oil companies to build roads out there in the oil sands, and they told him that they could not hire him unless not only he had to finish high school or get the equivalent, but he also had to pay $60,000 to take a course to become certified in the piece of equipment that he's been operating for 30 years.
There's certain areas of academia that are not just superfluous but predatory, and that's one of them. I mean, you think about it. If you really wanted, because like if you just talk about trade school as a concept, as a thing in and of itself, you're basically talking about a waste. Unless you're talking about the trade itself, that would take care of it, not an education system, not a college, not people who went to school to learn to be teachers, and then come in and teach how to do the thing, whether the thing is farming or welding or weaving or any particular trade, photography, anything. Not people who learned how to be teachers, but people who have done that job all their lives. Mm-hmm. That is how my grandfather was a welder. He was, I don't remember, I think his journeyman is the top top level of the trade, I think, but he was, and he didn't go to school for it. He didn't learn it in a classroom. He got a job, and they trained him, and then he got better at his job, and eventually got to do tasks that other welders that were not as good at it and not as steady as he was, and so on, until he became classified as the next level up and the next level up and the next. That's where you get good training, when the people who know what they're doing show you what they do, not when somebody who's sitting in a classroom. And you know, to go forward with this story, I taught photography for 3 years at a business branch of a state university, and it was just basically a very basic class for students that were going to want to be able to go into a job interview and say, you know, yes, I can do photography, and I could publish the newsletter for our business. You know, I can document your events, and I can produce images for the walls and things like that. So it wasn't like, you know, an expert level of photography, but I'm a photographer, and I've done event photography, I've done documentation photography, I've done, you know, journalistic photography, wedding photography, portrait photography, you name it. And so I taught from experience. And I had, you know, some of my students went out and started professions instead of just going into somebody else's business to get a job with, you know, the caveat, hey, I can do this too. They actually went out and became professional photographers. And, you know, before I taught the class, my dad taught the class, and he had students that went out and became professional photographers. And that was just from a basic photography class. You know, my father did not go to school for photography. He went to school to become an educator, but he ran a photography business on the side for 30 years and never bought advertising. My senior year, portrait photography, enough came in from the school that I went to, because the students all knew me, and they all knew my family and everything, and they all knew our reputation in photography, that's what funded my first year of college. And to say that you have to sit in a classroom, and to say that you have to study under Professor so-and-so and get a degree to know something is truly and utterly ridiculous. Well, at the end of that 3 years, they replaced me at the university with someone who had no experience in photography whatsoever, had merely taken my class, but had a degree, because the organization that does accreditation for universities prefers a degree. So they preferred the degree to the knowledge. At that point, they were replacing a person who could impart a much greater level of knowledge with someone who looked good on paper. So that's why I say, you know, you can't take education out of the trade.
No, you can't. Yeah. And what really gets me too is that, I mean, when I think about all the stuff that I've done in this house of mine, right? And I have patched lath and plaster properly, not like it was when by the previous owners, where they just slapped some plaster over top of the cracks and the cracks just reformed, but actually patched them properly. You know, installing flooring, doing plumbing work, doing wiring, replacing light fixtures, like just heavy, serious renovation work that I did almost entirely. I think the only thing that we had someone come in and do was installing the carpet in the basement, right? All of those things are things that I knew I could do because when I was 8 years old, I was buttering tiles for my dad, right? When he was doing the bathroom downstairs, when he was building a bathroom downstairs in our basement from scratch. He built all of the framing in the basement. It was a completely empty, unfinished basement. He built all of the framing. He wired the whole thing himself, right? And at first, I would just bring him his coffee, and then I wanted to be involved, and he involved me, right? He involved me. I was buttering tiles for him. I was laying out the tiles because they were irregular, to get the patterns as sort of aesthetically pleasing as possible, for him to put them up on the walls and on the floors. I was helping him with, he was teaching me how to install a P-trap. I mean, he was doing all of these things with me because I wanted to spend time with him. And he welcomed me into his sort of masculine world of building stuff and fixing stuff. I learned to swear holding a flashlight for him while he dicked around with the carburetor, right? In the rain, under the hood, in the dark, right?
Wow.
That's where I learned that there was a word, and it was cunt, right? And also another word, and it was whore. And he wasn't calling me those things. He was calling the carburetor those things. Right? This is what the beauty is of a relationship with your father. Is so much of my relationship with my father is a relationship involved in doing, in a mutual activity, right? And we used to, probably when I was newly single after my divorce, it drove my mother crazy because my dad and I would enjoy the mutual activity of admiring that really, really incredibly beautiful waitress in the incredibly tight pants that incredibly show off her incredible behind and her incredibly tight calves, right? And we would be kind of discussing between each other just how unbelievably gorgeous she was, and my mom would be like, "Oh, you too," And but this is just sort of the whole idea of father-daughter, to me was full of memories of buttering floor tiles and wall tiles for a bathroom, and learning how to use a wrench, and the whole time my dad's so patient with me, right? Absolutely patient, just instructing, right? None of it was a big deal. There was no emoting going on, right? It was just a nice time to spend with him, learning to do something useful, learning to become competent and confident in my ability to fix things, right? And that is priceless. The fact that relationship, when it was happening, felt so light to me. It felt so, it felt just completely natural. It felt as light as air, right? There was no, if I don't do well, I'm going to disappoint him. There was no weight on it in that way. He just welcomed me in and said, "Okay, you want to help out? Here's something for you to do. Let's do it together." Right? That's just, I think that is one of the things that children miss out on so much if they don't have their fathers around.
Yeah. Well, that's something that, you realize we've both kind of been talking about, that is we pick up things from both of our parents. We pick up a work ethic, and we pick up our learning style. You have an innate learning style, but you broaden that learning style as you grow. And without those relationships with the adult members of your family, and it's not just your parents. You've got your grandparents, you've got aunts, possibly aunts and uncles, cousins, people who are older than you in your family. At once upon a time, it was the norm for extended families to be involved. Even, sometimes all under the same roof, involved in the raising of children. And today we have this situation where not only has feminism told women, you can do this all by yourself and you don't need anybody's help, feminism has isolated women, and
yeah.
they've put this little wall around women, and rather than saying you can do this on your own and you don't need any help, it's really a prison of you can't have help, because if you have help, you're not good enough.
Oh, it's absolutely obscene. It's horrible.
It is obscene. It's something that absolutely needs to be reversed. You know, even in families like my dad did not learn his work ethic from his father. He did not learn his toughness from his father. He didn't learn much of anything from his father. He never really knew him. He learned a lot of that from his mother. My dad's mother was 6 feet tall, and she ran the same machines at the factory where she worked as the men. And the men that worked there confirmed to my father that she ran them like a man. She got up when she was sick and went to work. She got up when she was injured and went to work. She died before she was 50.
But even though she was able to sort of pull it off, she really was. It still would have been better for her and for your dad if she had help. If there were other
it would have been better for everyone. And she did have some. She had my dad's uncle, and he had male role models. But one of his greatest male role models was his mother. And I think that's
really
a
awesome.
rarity. It's absolutely a rarity. I know a few women, very, very few women that I could say that about. I know a lot of men that I could say it's a great male role model. There are very, very few women I could also say the same thing. Now, I can say there are plenty of women I know that are great female role models. My other grandmother was a fabulous female role model. And there are things about her I could say, well, this is kind of a male role model too, because she did have that same stick-to-itiveness, but the profession she chose was different, and the life path that she chose was different. But looking at that, I've identified the thing that children get from for lack of a better term, the accountable parent. And it's not like women back in the day were not accountable. They did different accountability than men did. They were accountable for different things.
Yes.
Accountable for different jobs in the home and with the family. But what was required for a man's accountability was more demanding. Was not just more demanding on his body, but it was more demanding on his psyche and more demanding on his spirit. And it's something that children learn from their fathers or from their family breadwinners. For the better way to put it would be their family breadwinners. And that ties back into today's fatherlessness. And it's not so much that homes where parents are divorced or where parents never got married, that those kids are somehow doomed. What really kills the benefit the children can have is whether or not the mothers are accountable.
It makes them have to overcome something.
Right, but what really hurts kids in that situation is whether or not the mothers carry that accountability.
Yeah.
If the mother turns around and says, well, I'm mad at your dad, so you can't see him and you can't love him, she's hurting her kids.
Oh, God, that's...
If she and she's hurting them in incredible ways. If she says, well, I just can't handle this, I'm not even going to try, and just languishes on welfare for the child's entire life, entire childhood. The child is harmed by that. And
what frustrates me most about that first that you mentioned, that I'm mad at your dad and so you're not allowed to love him, that's like saying to a kid, you're not allowed to love half of who you are. That's exactly what that's saying. You are not allowed to love half of who you are. Half of who you are is unlovable.
Yeah. Well, And it's
always
more likely
assumed.
to happen. It really is more likely to happen in a household where the custodial single parent is a mother. Because men are taught that they're not allowed to act on their anger and they're not allowed to act on their feelings because they're dangerous if they do, or they're not legitimate. Their feelings are not legitimate, or other stupid reasons that people come up with. Just you can't be do anything, act on your feelings.
I think it might also be selection bias, right? Like, because I'm not going to say that men are less prone to that kind of thing than women, but because it takes so much of a demonstration of fitness for a man to have primary custody of his kids over a woman, right? Then you just have more of a chance that the man who has primary custody of his children is going to be a good parent, is going to be fair, is going to be reasonable.
And he's going to toe the line.
Those things, right?
Men with primary custody are like unicorns.
Well, yeah.
Oh, really?
Actually, according to the U.S. Census, the last U.S. Census in the United States, 85.3% of all custodial single parents are mothers, and only 14.7% are fathers. But 80.7% of all custodial single fathers are at or above the poverty level. And only 19.3% of them are under, whereas with custodial single mothers, only 62.6% of them are at or of all of them are at or above the poverty level. 37.4% of them are below the poverty level. And what's really bad is 35% of single mothers are unemployed. They're not employed. And that's a big part of why. But it's not all of it, because a quarter of single fathers are not employed. And there's still a significant number of fathers who do not have jobs, single fathers who do not have jobs, are still not under the poverty level because they have other ways that they make money. So
they do yard work around the neighborhood.
Well, or they have their own business rather than being employed, or they have some sort of financial holdings that they live on. Maybe they're independent writers, but of the single custodial fathers who are not in the workforce, half of them are above the poverty at or above the poverty level.
What really strikes me as amazing, though, about poverty and how it pertains to this argument is that when the census measures poverty, when they measure poverty and decide who's below the poverty line and who's above the poverty line, and so who needs help, right?
Yeah.
Over 90% of the benefits government gives to single mothers to alleviate poverty are not included in those calculations. So let's just look at this scenario, right? I'm a single mother. I work full-time. I make $30,000 a year. I'm on the edge of poverty with my 3 kids, right? I'm right on the poverty line in Canada, $30,000 a year. So the government says she's in danger of becoming impoverished, so let's offer her this program and that program, and we're going to give her a healthcare subsidy, and we're going to give her a rental subsidy, and we're going to give her a daycare subsidy, right, to help her out, right? None of all of those benefits is included in my income when it comes to measuring how poor I am, right?
Right.
So because I have all of those benefits, now I'm like, wow, I don't have to work full-time anymore. I can drop down to like $20,000 a year of earned income because I have this $10,000 top-up between all of these benefits that the government's giving me now, right? So then the government comes in and they look at that and they say, oh my God, she's more poor than she was last year because they're not counting any of that stuff. So we have to give her more things, right? So now I'm like, wow, I can work like 20 hours a week and I only have to earn $20,000 a year because the government's just given me $10,000 more worth of benefits a year. So now I'm making the same $40,000 a year, except now I have time to go grocery shopping and cook from scratch instead of buying TV dinners and buying expensive takeout meals and stuff like that. And I have more time to spend with my kids and make sure that they're doing their homework, and I have more time to, look after my house and maybe fix things around the house instead of paying somebody to do it. And, I have all of this extra time to do things that my time is actually worth money. And so, I would not have done them when I was working 40, 45 hours a week. But now I'm only working 20 hours a week, so I can do them and save the money that I would pay somebody else to do them, right? And now the government tells me, oh my God, $20,000 a year, you're even more poor than when we started.
Yeah, and that's the self-perpetuating poverty machine. And in the United States, it is quite possible for a person to make more money. A single unemployed or underemployed custodial parent can, quote-unquote, earn more through the Health and Human Services Department than a full-time worker brings home. There are people on welfare who have more, and measured in the power to purchase things and services and shelter and clothing, that kind of thing, then I have 2 jobs, and they've got more purchasing power than me. If you count my husband's job, they still have more purchasing power than we do. There are people who are milking the system enough to be what would be considered middle class if we earned that much. And
but none of this counted in measures of poverty.
Right. Well, and this is the thing, though. What this means is men who have custody of their children are less likely to be welfare parents, whereas women who have custody of their children are more likely to be welfare, or at least in percentages of people who are doing it now, they are more likely to be welfare parents. And part of that is that it's hard for a father to get his kids. Part of it is that a lot of times men are already set in they've got their job, they've got their their plans about, they've started, because actually there are more women in the United States right now who are single mothers who were never married. Than there are single mothers who are divorcees. So a lot of these men are young men that have started working already, have rented their first apartment or bought their first house, and when they end up with custody of their children, they already have a system in place for supporting themselves and a family, whereas a lot of these women do not, because they haven't grown up yet.
No, it's really striking because I have found that men are more likely to see welfare the way I saw it, right? And the way I saw it for the 6 weeks that I was on it was, this is a necessary evil.
Yeah.
And the moment that I can not be on it anymore, I will not be on it anymore. And when I went into the welfare office and I saw women in the welfare office getting sort of the rolly eye treatment from the people behind the counter, right? They're in there, they're applying, they're being made to jump through all of these hoops, right? Because those people behind the counter, they've been in this for a while.
Yep.
And they know who's just in it because they don't feel like working, right? And when I went in there and I showed them my employment record of 20 years of being self-supporting and showed them my doctor's note saying she has a medical condition caused by stress, several medical conditions caused by stress, she cannot work, right? And because of her occupation, which was I was a server, so my wage, my hourly wage was about a quarter of my actual earnings. EI, unemployment insurance in Canada, only compensates you for your wage, right? Which would have amounted, what I would have qualified for was like $300 a month for me and my 3 kids, right, on unemployment insurance. So she needs a welfare top-up, right? And I showed them all of this, and they said, well, how long do you figure you're going to need welfare? And I said, as soon as I'm out of this situation, I will be off welfare, right? And so all I need is a patch for the next, month or 2, and then I will be done with this. And it was 6 weeks, and I went off, and that was that. And they bent over backwards to get me every single benefit that they could. They suggested things that I was entitled to that I had no idea that I was entitled to, right? Because
I had that experience
I
too.
don't really need that because I don't plan on being on welfare for more than a couple months, so I don't need long-term blah, 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 right?
I got badgered over it, and actually what I saw was very different from what you saw. Not only did they try to sell me long-term services that I didn't want because I wasn't going to be there that long, they also, well, the grossest thing that happened when I was in there was one of the ladies actually looked at me across her desk and said, "This is not for people like you." And then when she saw that, because they ask about your ethnicity, and I had checked off Caucasian and Native American because my heritage has both. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, she wanted to throw every benefit in the world at me.
Oh, yeah.
I have never been as angry as I was at that moment when I realized what she was doing. I wanted to spit in her face. I've never wanted to spit in somebody's face before. And
you know what's amazing in Canada?
I'm a little bit. I'm very usually very controlled anymore when I get mad. I don't talk. But in any case, that system, it's designed to destroy the way the family unit was. It's designed to destroy everything that we've talked about today, being valuable as part of being part of a family and having the parents together. And we could do a whole show on that.
Oh no, it's the family used to be a self-contained unit. It used to be a unit that whether you had, I remember the ads for the Cooperators insurance company where it was basically a group of farmers who just all got together on their own and formed sort of an insurance cooperative to insure their crops, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a community there that's working to basically pay into a rainy day fund, right? And that's absolutely admirable and wonderful, and it shows the best nature of humanity, right? Yeah. But for the most part, unless it was a rainy day, unless there was some disaster, families were considered to be self-contained, extended families, self-contained, self-supporting units, right? And so all members had this vested interest in ensuring the success and survival and positive outcomes for everybody, right? And this is what we've really lost when we basically say the family is no longer defined by the parents and the grandparents and
guys,
the
I gotta wrap this up.
Yet we are running out of time, but we still have like 2 minutes left.
But I have an announcement to make.
Oh my God! But we've taken that and we've basically said the family is whatever the mother wishes it to be, and if that doesn't include the father, then that's fine, right? The government will step in and take on the role, the bare minimum of what the role of father was, right? And
bottom line is the mother shouldn't get to decide what role the father has in the child's life.
Of course not. Of course she shouldn't.
That's the father's decision.
And the child's decision.
And the child's decision.
Yeah. All right. But, well, I've got something that needs to be said.
All right. Say it.
Are you a reliable artist who would like to volunteer some of your time to help us out here on the show every week, producing different pieces of art? Well, mosey on over and drop some samples of your work and send it to honeybadgersradio@gmail.com. If we like it, we'll bring you on, and you get to talk to us.
Oh, they don't get to talk to us. Oh, they get to talk to you guys, not to me.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, because you're just you're on top of a mountain, and we all have the time to get up there.
I'm above all of that.
Well, I'm never in the chat room anymore.
I only talk.
Again, that's honeybadgersradio@gmail.com. Also, I want to thank everybody who's a part of the show for this week's show. All of our lovely panelists. Crystal, who is silent. Rory, who is here. Yeah. Rory, who helps us out with has been helping us out with the Gamergate situation, and really just everybody who helps in these little ways that help us do this every single week. All right.
Rory! Yes.
All right.
You're not going to tell him that kills people, are you?
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Have a nice night.